here in quarantine with all the rest of you. And I'm here to tell you about the SAT and the ACT, what the differences are between them. And near the end, we'll have a chance to go through some sample questions. If any of you have questions, just feel free to write them in the chat. Since there are a number of you, I don't know, having people speak up over the microphone and webcams might make things get a little confused. So I'll try to keep my chat box open. Yeah, there it is. I'm still getting used to this software myself. But for now, let's talk about the SAT and ACT. Exactly what they are. And hang on, I gotta move this window thing out of my way. There we go. All right. Okay, so there we go. So our agenda here, we're going to talk about what is the SAT, what is the ACT, give a little bit of the testing timeline, and talk about how we might be able to help here. First of all, there we go. As it says there on the slide, the biggest mistake we see people make is thinking of college admissions as just a game of winners or losers, right? But really getting into college or attending college in the first place isn't a matter of who wins or loses, but whether you get the education that you're looking for from a place that you'd be happy with. Few things about the admissions process. First off, it has never been even easier to get into college than it is now because, well, there are so many colleges out there. You're sure to find an open spot from some college that will accept you. But at the same time, it's also never been more difficult to get into college than it is now. Just think of all the hoops you have to jump through, not just with standardized tests, but also, loan application forms or financial aid, and just the application itself with the writing sample that you have to provide and letters of recommendation and all that. It's so competitive, but we're here to make that a little bit easier. Few things to keep in mind, though, for what makes for a good application and what will help you get into the school of your choice. Now, first overall, of course, is great grades. Now, I myself am a test prep teacher. I teach SAT, ACT, GRE, GMAT, a whole bunch of other tests. So my specialty is just knowing about the tests themselves, right? But the biggest part of it, of course, is just getting good grades, okay? That really is the first thing that colleges will look for. Secondly is test scores, which is my specialty, and I can help you improve your test scores and improve that aspect of your application. But of course, that's not everything. You also want good applications, and that's all the stuff that I mentioned already about letters of recommendation and good essays and having a good, well-rounded high school career and all that good stuff. Okay. Up next, hang on, there we go. There it is. A lot of people have a certain amount of fear about these tests. I would say try to eliminate that because these tests are pretty predictable, and we want to help you eliminate that particular fear and stress. But we'll just get down to the nuts and bolts about what these tests actually are. So yes, these are, here, I'll just give you, there we go. I'll just give you all the information right at the top where, yes, these tests are used by universities, primarily in the US, but many outside the US, will use your test scores to help determine admissions, but also financial aid. If you have particularly high scores, then that could make you eligible for a certain amount of financial aid from the colleges themselves. Now, as for SAT, ACT, pretty much every university knows about both tests. And any that requires SAT or ACT will require one, but not both. And they're fairly similar tests. There are small differences between the two, which we'll get into, but the big thing is that both tests are very different from what you might be used to from a test in school. Few other things. So these tests purport to be an accurate predictor of academic mastery and potential. Well, that's just certainly not true. It's a fairly arbitrary test. Sure, the SAT and the ACT, they test reading skills, verbal, math, a little bit of this and that, but really all it tests is how well you can bubble in the correct answers over the course of 3-4 hours on a Saturday morning, okay? So these tests really are arbitrary and dehumanizing and exhausting. But the good news is that third bullet point where it says doing well on these tests is a skill that can be trained, because these tests are fairly predictable. Now, what these tests are not, I already mentioned, not a measure of your academic performance. I think your grades are a better measure of that, and even that's imperfect. And they're not comprehensive tests of your knowledge and mastery. You know, if you've ever taken a sample SAT or ACT, you've never seen, you know, like, what's the capital of Germany or whatever. It's not a test of knowledge. It's more a test of what does this say, or can you answer this math word problem, that sort of thing. And of course, it's not a fun way to spend a bunch of money to take a test on a Saturday. Now, what should you think about, you know, when to take the SAT or ACT and whether to do so? Well, take into account your university application deadlines and requirements. A number of universities don't require the SAT but accept them, in which case we still recommend you take it because it could mean additional financial aid from the universities themselves. But also take into account what year you are in high school, because typically deadlines for colleges are around, you know, wintertime to December, January of one's senior year. So we recommend preparing it for the junior year or the summer after the junior year, so that even if you have to take it a second time, that fall test in September, October could be the last time that you take it. But determining when to take it, like, those guidelines are helpful, but consider everything else in your life. Whether you have additional tests that you have to worry about. As I said, I personally took the SAT the summer after my junior year because I didn't have any conflicts. It was just summertime. But other things to think about. Which test is best for you? SAT and ACT, as I said, are fairly similar, but we'll get into the differences. How you'll prepare for it, exactly, you know, or approximately how much time do you want to devote to ensuring that you get close to your goal score. And that will be mostly determined by where you are right now. How are you performing? So as I was getting at earlier, what do these tests measure? Well, they're not a measure of one's intelligence, but they can be used to award aid. I mentioned that. But they don't reflect your grades or predict your college grades. But as I said, they can and should be prepared for. Now, the other question is, do they test what you've learned in high school? Well, kind of. I mean, you should know how to read, and there are some mathematical concepts that you will be tested on that presumably you went over in high school. But really, all the SAT and the ACT tests are just how well you can take that particular test. Now we'll get into just the specific scoring. These numbers, forgive the formatting, I think something got a little wonky in the translation here, but I think you can see what's going on, where on the SAT, your math and your verbal scores, you'll get a scaled score on a scale of 200 to 800, and typically people add those numbers together. So you'll usually get a number between 400 and 1600 when people talk about their overall SAT scores. The ACT works a little bit differently, in which you'll get a composite score on a scale of 1 to 36 on each of the 4 tests, English, math, reading, and science, and your overall ACT score is an average of those 4 numbers. So typically, you'll get a number on a scale of 1 to 36. Really, what the difference is, it's mostly just empty perception. You know, it sounds better to get a 1200 on your SAT than it is to get a 32 on your ACT, but it's better to get a 32, even though, you know, the numbers are different. But just realize that colleges understand each test's scales and are reasonably familiar with them. Okay, so here's what's actually on the SAT. It's really predictable. You're going to get these 4 sections in a row. You'll reading, which is 65 minutes, 5 passages spread out over 52 questions. Then you'll get this W and L means writing and language. It's really grammar. I'll show you a couple of those sample questions soon enough. But it's 4 passages, 44 questions. You have 35 minutes, which sounds like not a lot of time, but typically, at least compared to the other sections here, my students have usually had the least amount of trouble finishing the grammar section. And then come 2 math sections, the first of which you are not allowed to use a calculator. That's 25 minutes and 20 questions, so a little bit less than half of the overall test, but still an important part of it. So if you're planning to take the SAT and it's been a while since you've, I don't know, had to multiply stuff or divide things by hand, then you might want to have to get back into the swing of things. And then, of course, comes the longer calculator section. But if you take the SAT or one of the practice tests, you'll probably find that the calculator really isn't necessary for most of those questions. There's usually 1 or 2 questions where it's helpful, where you have to take, you know, like 12% of a weird number several times over, in which case, yeah, use the calculator. But most of the test has word problems and numbers that are easy enough to manipulate that a calculator really isn't required. And then at the end is the optional essay. Now, it is optional. You do pay extra to do the essay. And most schools don't require the essay. I think we're down to just under a dozen total universities that are still explicitly requiring the essay. So my piece of advice regarding the essay is don't bother unless you are applying to one of those schools that is requiring an essay. Or if you think you might apply to one of those schools, just be on the safe side and do the essay. But the essay itself is it's a rhetorical analysis essay where it's not asking about your opinion of anything. It'll be asking, well, it'll give you some sort of prompt, like a speech from a politician or something like that. And you have to explain not just what the politician is saying, but also how the argument is being advanced, okay? And, well, you've seen the fees and such here. Now, the ACT is a little bit different, but it's fairly similar in that it is predictable in the order of things. Here it starts you with English, which is essentially the same as the grammar section on the SAT. And then you'll have 1 math section in which you are allowed to use a calculator. But notice how the timing is different. Whoops, sorry, I accidentally hit the screen there. You'll notice how the timing is different, where you have only 1 minute per question on the math on the ACT, whereas on the SAT, on average, you have a little bit more than a minute per question, okay? Back to ACT, we have the reading section, also fairly similar to the SAT, but here it's 40 questions in only 35 minutes. Same for the science, which I'll talk about in a second. But for the reading, it's designed, and the science are designed to be really hard to finish in time. And I'd say that's the biggest difference between the two. The SAT likes to trick you and confuse you with weirdly worded questions or lengthy word problems where you can lose track of where everything is, that sort of thing. Whereas the ACT just tries to put pressure on you with regard to the time. So, like, typically the English section, 45 minutes and 75 questions. While it sounds like a lot, it's a lot like the grammar section on the SAT, where most students don't have a lot of trouble finishing. Then comes the math, 60 questions in 60 minutes, kind of hard to finish. Then the reading, this is 40 questions in 35 minutes spread out over 4 different passages. So on average, you have, 8.5 minutes per passage. And then comes the science, which is also 35 minutes, but typically that's spread out over 6, maybe even 7 different passages. So it just keeps getting harder to finish as time goes on. That's what I would say is the biggest difficulty of the ACT. Then finally, at the end, there is an optional essay. Here, the ACT essay isn't about a rhetorical analysis. It's more of, it's more of an issue essay in which you'll get 3 perspectives on an issue. Say school uniforms. One perspective will say that school uniforms are a good thing. Another will say it's a bad thing and a violation of your freedom of expression. And then the third will be like, gee, this is an interesting thing to think about. And it'll be your job to write an essay explaining just what your perspective is. And in doing so, you should find a way to at least somehow address all 3 perspectives. So little less demanding in terms of analysis, but you'll have to come up with your own examples and reasoning within that one. But again, the ACT essay, completely optional. We recommend doing it only if it's required or you might potentially apply to one of those schools that is requiring it. Now, that's what's on the test. A fairly common question I get is just, what is a good score on the SAT or the ACT? And invariably, I hear people say, oh, well, a perfect score is a good score. Well, okay, yeah, that's true. But really, the answer is a good score is whatever score gets you into the school of your choice, okay? And not only is a good score one that gets you into the school of your choice, but one that might grant some scholarship money. Now, this chart here really just shows an SAT cutoff on the 400 to 1600 scale for what some universities will use as a gauge, and the average amount of scholarship money those universities will grant in those cases. But just this, you don't need to dwell on the numbers themselves, but this table really just shows you how every school is a little bit different, okay? Everybody treats the SAT and the ACT a little bit differently. So I encourage you to go to all of those, whatever universities you're applying to, go to their websites and find out not just, what the average SAT scores are for incoming freshmen. They'll tell you that. They'll tell you that range of values. From the 25th to the 75th percentile, here's the range of SAT scores that will typically get you in. But usually on the upper end of that, or even a little bit beyond that range, could mean scholarship money. And so that's another thing to keep in mind when thinking about what sort of scores you're looking for. Now we'll quickly go through the key differences. I mentioned some of the general ones. Now you'll see the SAT has a no calculator section, right? But the ACT, you are allowed a calculator. That difference isn't really that huge to me, because on the SAT, the no calculator section, Okay, you're not allowed to use a calculator, but it's not required. And as for the verbal, the subject matter and the question types are pretty much the same. The reading section, they all ask some version of what does this say, or why does the author say it, or what does this word mean? And the grammar are pretty much exactly the same. It's just the timing is different. On average, you have less time on the ACT. Now the SAT, in terms of subject matter, with the math, it's algebra, problem solving. It says advanced math. It says nonlinear equation. That's quadratics, really, or finding points on a curve. But really, there's no calculus. Any trigonometry can be boiled down to SOHCAHTOA. If you know what that means, you're covered when it comes to the subject matter on the math. What makes the math weird on the SAT is just how complicated the questions can be. As for the verbal, the grammar section, it is just editing and proofreading, grammar, comma placement, verb tense, things like that. And the reading is just reading comprehension, as I mentioned. What does this say? Why did the author say it? That sort of thing. Now the ACT, the math is pretty much the same. It's just weighted a little bit differently. So notice your advanced math and additional topics are a fairly small part of the SAT. It's a little bit bigger part of the ACT. Like there's a little bit more geometry, and you're guaranteed to get exactly 4, for whatever reason, trigonometry questions. But in terms of the subject matter, they're really the same. It's just ACT questions tend to be a little bit more straightforward, less wordy than SAT ones. And the verbal, you'll see, the English and the reading, really the same. It's just the timing that's different. But there is that fourth section on the ACT, which is the science section, which does set the ACT apart in a way. So you might see some sort of graph or chart and some questions and additional charts and all that stuff, but don't worry, you don't actually need to know any additional science ahead of time in order to do well on the ACT science. All it really is data interpretation, and you should just know how science works. The only prior knowledge you might be tested on are things that you probably already know, like boiling means when a liquid turns into a gas, something like that. It's not a quiz on science, it's more of a data interpretation sort of section. And the main problem, or the main difficulty with the science, just like everything else on the ACT, is just finishing in time. Okay. So all of this addresses how many times you should take these tests. My general piece of advice is prepare so that you have the goal of taking one of these tests only once, but most people take it a second time, which is totally fine. Most people who take it that second time tend to do a little bit better that second time. And take it a third time only if absolutely necessary, if you really think you can get a higher score. But don't do it more than 3 times. Worry about the other parts of your application at that point. Don't waste your time and money. Now, if you do take these tests multiple times, you do have the score choice option. And also, one minor advantage the SAT has is typically schools will take the highest SAT math score and the highest verbal score, even if they weren't on the same day, and they will super score them. Traditionally, that was often done with the SAT, and nowadays some schools are starting to do that with the ACT. But all that stuff about super scoring, also keep in mind that schools additionally have the option to just ask for all the scores. Most schools don't bother, but just realize that. And that's another reason we recommend not taking the test more than 3 times. Here are some upcoming test dates. Now, in light of the current situation, everybody, or most of us, pretty much locked up in our homes, the SAT has had to be canceled in recent months, but we have been assured that the August 29th date will happen. It might happen in schools. I'm sure that's their ideal situation, but if not, they will make it available for you to take it at home. Exactly how they're going to administer that, I'm not entirely sure, but those of you looking to take the SAT or itching to, August 29th is probably your date. And then it looks to be following its standard schedule from then on, September, October, December, March, May. Yeah. Same thing with the ACT, but even sooner. The April test didn't happen, but I've been told that the June and July tests are indeed on, and just like with the SAT, they might elect, actually for June, probably will elect to have it taken at home. And now that the ACT is computer-based, I think they are a little bit better equipped to administer that come June and July. But all that's what's on the test. Let's worry about how to get good at taking the test. And just know that preparation is key. Get good at these particular types of questions. Now, our process here is, well, yeah, it's good to have a good knowledge of the content. You should know how to read. You should know how to do basic algebra and arithmetic, right? And if you're lacking in any of those areas, we can certainly help you with that. My primary focus, though, are on number 2 and 3, your strategy and technique. You know, exactly how many questions do you want to answer? When you see a question that looks a certain way, how do we approach it? How do you keep yourself organized? All that stuff. And then I try to hammer that stuff home so that it becomes second nature to you by making you practice and analyze your practice. Try to learn from your mistakes. Check your answers. Ask me whether you might have been able to reach a particular answer much quicker, you know, that sort of thing. And related to that is just confidence and endurance. In my classroom courses, endurance is a big thing, where I will progressively make the drills a little bit longer just so they get used to having to focus for, well, if it's the reading, 65 minutes at a time, you know. So one thing about the SAT and the ACT, the biggest thing really, is that the SAT and the ACT are not like any test you've ever taken before. It's not like a test in school, and everything about the SAT is designed in such a way as to take advantage of what you're used to and get you to make mistakes. So, you know, you're not going to see questions like this on the SAT where it's asking, well, name the quadrilateral. Oh, this one's Bob. Okay, that's technically not wrong, right? Or find X. Oh, here it is. There's X right there. Usually the way the questions are worded will be in a way that can't be argued. Like, what is the value of X, right? Or which of the following is the most accurate name for this quadrilateral? That sort of thing, you know? But also, these tests take advantage of the fact that you're predictable. Now, in my classes and in these, you know, in these seminars when I have an audience, I often ask, okay, give me a number. If you're in the chat, just give me a number. I don't care. Anybody? I hope you have the chat. I have my window open. Okay, 75. Cool. That's fine. Any others? No? 4. Okay, we got 75 and 4. Well, let's just think about it. And 21. Sure. What do these numbers have in common? We got 75, 4, and 21. Well, all those numbers are positive, right? And they're all integers, meaning like there's nothing after the decimal point. You know, it's not a fraction. And also, they're reasonably small. Like 75, you might say, is pretty big, but in the grand scale of things, it's just a two-digit number, right? So whenever I ask this question, give me a number, all I ever get are small positive integers, right? You could have said -50. You could have said pi. You could have said the square root of 5. All of those are numbers, right? But you gave me a small positive integer because, well, you're human, which also means you're predictable. Another thing to think about. You see the background of the PowerPoint you see on your screen, right? Think about what color that is. Then think, what's that fabric? Not this fabric, but like a fabric that comes from worms. Think about that. Then I'm going to ask, okay, what do cows drink? Well, if you said milk, oops, hang on. Where's my mouse? There it is. If you said milk, well, no, cows produce milk. Cows drink water, right? Now, a number of you probably figured out what was going on, but a certain percentage of you were primed to think milk, because I made you think the color white, I made you think silk, and then I asked, what do cows drink? You probably some of you probably immediately thought, oh, milk. No, I was leading you down the garden path to the wrong place, right? The SAT loves to do that. But just know that we can help you with that. And I have some specific examples here. If you'll indulge me, let's see, where is it? That and that. Okay, so I hope you can see all this. There we go. Okay, and okay, so I have. Whoops, no, I didn't want to maximize that. There we go. I just wanted to scroll this way. I wanted to move this a little bit over so I could see the thing. Okay, so there. Can everybody see? Everybody see the new question that I have here? And hopefully you can see my board that I'm writing on, my scratch paper. Good, thank you. Thank you for letting me know that. So, here we have a reading question. Now, for the reading, most questions require a good amount of reading, like a whole, not necessarily a whole passage, but multiple paragraphs. And we don't really have the time to go through all of that. But I do want to show you at least one question here, which is typically the easiest question type here, where it's asking, as used in line 53, deploy most nearly means. So in here, first off, hang on, I'm still getting my screen together. There we go. You want to read a good window around where you're going, around where the question directs you, right? So go ahead, read what you need, and, well, tell me what you think in the answer choices here. You can just say it and put it in the chat if you have a particular, we have B or C. Okay. Yeah, well, you can't see the entire question. Yes, my SAT master. I think I'm just sharing my screen, right? It should just be there. Because all it says is, because you don't see the entire passage, right? But the question is just deploy most nearly means. Can you see that? Actually, you know what? I think I can see audience view. What do we see? No, that should be fine. That should be okay. You should be able to see that. What comes after most? Oh, it's most nearly means. I think you just need to move your go to meeting thing, because at least according to my audience view, most nearly mean, yeah, it should be visible for you all, but it's not a huge deal. The question is just deploy most nearly means what. So let's take a look at this. It was in line 53, so let's just read these sentences. It had long been hoped that New Horizons would be able to deploy its instruments to study further objects in the Kuiper Belt, but back in early 14, it wasn't clear that astronomers and planetary scientists were going to be able to find any suitable candidates within the range of trajectories that the mission, with its limited onboard fuel resources, could reasonably adjust to. Okay, so here we've got our answer choices. And yeah, what I would say, let's just predict an answer where we have, it has long been hoped that it would be able to deploy its instruments to study further objects. So my guess, probably like use, but I'm saying, okay, well, we got mimic. Well, it's mimicking its instruments, doesn't make sense. And yeah, negate doesn't make any sense. Why would it negate its own instruments? And so I saw one of you say either B or C, which makes sense. But then just think, all right, would it utilize its instruments or would it release its instruments? Well, it would probably use its instruments rather than release them, right? It's just going to send them out into the Kuiper Belt. Probably not. So I'd probably go with B for that, you know. But let's take a look at another one here. Let's see. This one, yeah. Take a look at this next one. And yeah. No, stop it. I just want you to, I hate that Windows keeps making assumptions about where I want my windows to be. Okay, so hang on. That, just want it here. I wish it would stop. I just want it near the top, but I don't want it huge. There. And then we'll scroll it this way. All right, cool. Now, this is a typical grammar type question where it will ask, it'll have not necessarily a question, but part of it will be underlined. And you'll get no change and then like 3 alternatives. So here, this is number 36. So I'm going to see, all right, the novel that spawned a series of novels dealing with the same fantastic universe, the first of which was The Fall of Hyperion, published in 1990. Okay, well, I'd probably read the sentence before it for a little bit of context so that I know what's going on. But here, I just see we got no change. We got which is that which is kind of weird in itself. I probably wouldn't choose that anyway, adding more words without fixing anything. And then delete. Oh, okay, I see delete. If I see delete on a grammar question, there's about, actually a little greater than a 50% chance that that's the answer. So I would start there. And I would see, well, if I get rid of the that, does it hold up? Does it stand on its own? So we've got the novel spawned a series of novels dealing with the same fantastic universe, the first of which was The Fall of Hyperion, published in 1990. Oh, okay. I guess we don't need the that there, right? I would indeed delete that one, right? Because the that makes it an incomplete sentence. The novel that spawned a series of novels did what? You know what I mean? Well, let's take a look at another one here. So we got 39 here. Actually, this one benefits from having the question from before it, but I think we can see this. Yeah, we'll just say the sentence starts with they here. They spend the long journey to Hyperion, sharing, well, I guess it's their stories, each of which illuminates the Germany while explaining this new fantasy world to the reader. This is another one where it's not really testing a particular grammatical concept, but, well, tell me what you think. You can just say in the chat. I don't want to give too much away here. Can everybody see that grammar question? I hope. Yeah, it is no change. Because like when would require a particular time doesn't make sense in context. Though would mean um, would require some sort of contrast, which I don't see. And as if, yeah, that just doesn't make sense in context either. Okay, and then this one, actually, I think I'm gonna need to scroll. Let's see. There, that should be good. Then we'll take a look. We got 41 down here. Go ahead and take a look at the sentence here and tell me what you think here. So notice what's different among the answer choices and what you might want to get rid of. Yeah, I see a D here. Yeah, that's a D. And you'd be correct, because the main difference, well, that jumps out to me is first, should we use an apostrophe? We use apostrophes for possession and contraction. Possession would mean that the pilgrim would have to own something, right? And the pilgrim isn't in ownership of anything, so I don't see a need for the apostrophe. And then the question is it travel or traveling? Well, let's see. The Canterbury Tales, which is itself a kind of travel narrative, as it follows, yeah, pilgrims traveling together to the Canterbury Cathedral. Yeah, that's just the one that makes the most sense, right? And it's the one that doesn't break any known grammatical rules. Now let's take a look at some math. Here I'm going to adjust my window so that I have go there, let you see it. Oh, come on, scroll. There we go. Now we're in business. All right. So we've got a couple of equations, and I'll just put them down here because I always write everything down that we have. 240 minus 20W, and B is 320 minus 30W. In the equations above, A and B represent the price per night for a room in Hotel A and Hotel B, respectively. W weeks after September 1st last autumn, what was the price per night in Hotel A when it was equal to the price per night in Hotel B? Well, why don't I give you a minute? If you have a suggestion for how to proceed, you can say it in the chat, or you can try to find the answer yourself. Just, I'll give you about a minute. Try to work on it, and then I'll show you how I do it. Give you a quick minute. All right. You might be making some headway here. And if you're not making any headway, I'll let you know. It's asking when prices are equal to each other, right? I think we should probably set these equations equal to each other. Minus 30W, right? And then, okay, we got an answer. We have an A. That's cool. And then, oh, that D was from the previous question. All right, so we have a guess of A, but let's find out. Let's solve for W here, right? So what? Add 30 over here, that leaves 10W, right? And then let's subtract the 240. So 320 minus 240, that's going to be 80. So W equals 8, right? Now it's asking for the price per night in that particular week. So yeah, let's just put that W in to either one of these equations. I just picked the first one for no real reason. And then 240 minus 160. Yep, that does indeed make 80. So yep, it is going to be A, right? So this one, it's not particularly demanding, but it does require you to keep everything organized. And you'll notice how I write out all my steps. I encourage my students to do the same. Well, let's take a look at another one here. We have if A minus 4B equals 18, what's the value of 3 to the A over 81 to the B? I'll give you, I'll just say a quick minute to look at this and tell me what you think. All right, it's been a minute. Maybe you're close to finding it, but really, the key here is just knowing that 81 is the same as 3 to the 4th power. Because, well, if it's not immediately obvious, well, 81 is 9 times 9, and 9 can be broken down into 2 3s each. So yeah, 3 to the 1, 2, 3, 4th power is the same as 81, right? So really, actually, let me make this a little bit more obvious. So 81 is 3 to the 4th, right? To the B. So really, we can say that's the same as 3A over 3 to the 4B. And if you have division with the same base and with the exponents, you can just straight up subtract them, right? So you have 3 to the A minus 4B. And the question here says A minus 4B is 18, so I guess that's the same as 3 to the 18, which would be answer choice C. Now, the other thing that I would say for this particular question is, notice D says the value cannot be determined. Well, if it's a problem-solving question on the SAT, it can always be determined. Now, granted, the SAT really doesn't play that trick so much anymore, but in the event that you see it, chances are very, very good that it can be determined. It can always be determined, okay? Any questions there? Let's take a look at another one then. A little bit more complicated. So y is greater than 5, which of the following is equivalent to all of that? I'll give you a second to look at it, see what sort of strategy you would take, and then I'll show you what I would do. So, yeah, go ahead. Okay, so if you were doing a whole bunch of crazy algebra, you're probably still in the middle of it. But I would say, rather than worry about all this crazy algebra, I'm going to do a technique that we call plugging in, because I see y all over these answer choices, and it tells me y is greater than 5. I'm just going to plug in my own number for y. Let's just say y equals 6. So now all I have to do is find 1 over 1, 6 minus 4 is 2, plus, and then 6 minus 3 is 3, so it's 1 over 1/2 plus 1/3. And so then that's going to be 3, 2, so that'll be 5/6 down there, 1/2 plus 1/3. You might have done the common denominator method, right? 3/6 plus 2/6 is 5/6, and 1 over 5/6 is going to be 6 over 5. Now that right there is the number that we call the target answer, right? It's the number that literally answers the question. So now let's go back to these answers. A says 2y minus 7, but well, remember y is 6, so that'd be 12 minus 7, 5, not our 6/5. And B also pretty clearly not going to give us a fraction, right? So now with C, well, let's just see. Y squared, 6 squared is 36, minus 7 times 6, that's 42, plus 12, over 2y minus 7, well, that's 5. Let's see, 36 minus 42, that's going to be what, -6. -6 plus 12 is 6. Hey, that's 6 over 5. That's our target. And notice D, well, that's exactly the same thing that we had, just flipped upside down, right? So that'd be 5/6. So yeah, the answer would have to be C, right? So whenever there's variables in the answers, I usually don't worry about the algebra itself. I make it easier. I turn it into arithmetic, you know? Let's take a look at perhaps even more complicated one, where we have polynomial g of x. When that g of x is divided by x minus 4, the remainder is 3. Which of the following statements about g of x must be true? Well, this is one of those that the SAT likes to do that seems like it involves a bunch of crazy, you know, crazy algebra or whatever, right? But it's saying when it's divided by x minus 4, the remainder is 3. Well, if you think about it like this, think about any sort of quadratic, right? Say you have like x squared plus 13x plus 30, right? If we were to factor that out, if you're familiar with quadratics, then it shouldn't take too long to know that you can factor in an x plus 10 and x plus 3. Meaning, if we divide this by x plus 10, then the remainder would be 0, right? So here, if x minus 4, if it's divided by x minus 4, the remainder is 3, well, that must mean that g of 4 would have to be 3, just based on the definitions of things. Because in my examples here, well, if I have x is -10 and x is -3, those are my roots, right? So in other words, if I were to say, like this is f of x, right? If I were to say f of -10, well, f of -10 would be 0, right? But if it leaves, because it leaves a remainder of 0. If it leaves a remainder of 3, it's just b. Not a lot you can do with that one other than just sort of understand how quadratics work, I would say. But let's take a look at one or two more. Okay. So we have our system of inequalities here. Let's graph how many quadrants will contain solutions to the system. Well, why don't I let you try this one on your own as I set this up. So go ahead. All right. So hopefully you got a little bit of a start just drawing these out. If you're familiar with the whole y equals mx plus b thing, it should make drawing these pretty easy because we have y is greater than or equal to, we'll worry about the inequalities later. Let's just draw the line, y is equal to x plus 2. Well, when x is 0, y is 2, right? And the slope is 1, so that's up 1 over 1. So it's going to look like that, right? Then we have y is greater than or equal to 1/3 x minus 1. Well, when x is 0, y is negative 1. And our slope is 1/3. Let's go up 1 and over 3. And it's not going to be a perfect drawing, but there we have that. So now the question is, where would the solutions be? Well, that's where the inequalities come in. So we want it greater than this line, but also greater than this line, meaning we need to shade above both of the lines, right? So it seems to me that we have solutions in quadrant 1, right around there, in quadrant 2, in here, and quadrant 3, right in here, but not in quadrant 4, right? So how many quadrants contain solutions? That's going to be B, 3 of them. Any questions there? Okay, let's take a look at one more and then we'll, let's see, wait a second. Is there a question here? Oops. No, this one, oh yeah, there is. Okay, yeah, we need to zoom out here. Do that efficiently. Zoom that. Too much. Okay. So, all right, we've got this here and it says, figure above shows the graph on the xy plane of the function f of x equals x squared plus 2x minus 8. Which of the following is an equivalent form of the function that includes the coordinates of vertex v as constants in the function? Now this one is another SAT question that seems like it's asking you to do a bunch of math, but it's with just a little bit of savvy about the types of questions they ask, it becomes pretty easy. Where it's just asking which of these will show us the vertex, or which is in vertex form. And if you don't already know vertex form of a quadratic equation, well, this here is what we call standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c, right? Vertex form is y equals x minus h squared plus k, where h and k are the x and y coordinates of the vertex. So let's look at these answer choices, and oh gee, look at that. It's got to be A, because that's the only one in vertex form. We didn't actually have to do any of the additional, working it through to figure out what that vertex is. Where, I mean, I guess you could, right? Because you have x plus 1 squared, and that means you're adding 1 there. So you're ending up with x plus 1 squared minus 9. So you see they match up. But all this stuff here, you didn't need to worry about it, right? The answers were friendly enough where we knew what the question was asking. We could just move on. And that's what a lot of the SAT really is, So, yeah, are there any particular questions you guys have? We're at about, we're definitely at our time limit here. Are there any questions about SAT, ACT? What questions to see? Well, maybe some of you are formulating them. If you don't and something comes up later, I'll put my email address in the chat as well. I can be found at darylj@score-plus.com if you have any questions. Just know my specialty is test prep. If you have questions about future classes that we're starting, I would say you can call one of the numbers on that slide there. Oops, hang on. I'll move my thing. Yeah, you can see all of those numbers, and you can email the online learning at score-plus.com as well to let you know about any particular other questions. Okay, I have a question here. Is SAT more difficult than A's or A levels? Do we need a different coaching method, or is A level knowledge enough to get good scores? Well, my whole point is just that they're different. You probably do need separate specific practice for the SAT. Now, is one harder than the other? It really depends on your own personal preferences or tastes. I mean, A levels tend to be a little more specifically demanding than the SAT, but the SAT requires a different skill set of a different level of patience and just savvy with the type of questions you're likely to see. I mean, they're totally different animals, so I would say, yeah, you should you should look at them different. Now, as for different coaching method, different from each other, yeah, I'd say so. But what that coaching method means for you, that's up to you, whether you want to get a hold of some books and do self-study. If you want to sign up for our online student center that has additional lessons and sample questions and that sort of thing, you could do that, or you can enroll in one of our courses. You can ask for me like when my next class will be starting, because I have SAT and ACT classes starting all the time. Especially now that people are going to be starting to take the SATs again, then that'll be certainly helpful. Let's see. If I'm going to apply for uni in 2022, when's the best time for me to give my SAT? Okay, 2022, if you're applying, assuming you're looking to meet that either December of 2021 or January of 2022 early bird deadline, the last time you should take it should be this upcoming October. So I would recommend preparing now for either the August SAT or a June or July ACT. Just get on that now, because, or wait, hang on, that would be a year from now, because you're saying 2022. So because it's only 2020. So not now, I'd say. Basically exactly a year from now is what I would recommend. Now, if you expect to be particularly busy next year when it comes to school, it might not be the worst idea to just try to take the SAT or the ACT in the coming months, just to get it out of the way. And if you get a score you're happy with, you won't have to worry about it ever again. So you can consider that too. But I'd say if you're following the way most people do, I'd say wait a year. But you can certainly take advantage of the unique situation, because I know you all have online classes and whatever, but typically students aren't quite as busy as they have been, when they've actually had to attend school. So you might want to take advantage of that and get the SAT out of the way while everybody's, locked up in their homes. Let's see. This says, I will complete my A-levels this year with predicted grades. So when should I apply for university if I'm going to complete A-level next year? Well, that's something you can talk to our office about more specifically. It sort of depends on where you're applying to school, but generally speaking, you want to get your applications in for the early bird deadline, which usually is in either December or January, prior to the fall semester that you're looking to attend. But for more specifics, I'd say contact our office or the colleges you're applying to. For which countries are SAT and ACT applicable for? Well, primarily the United States, and a good handful of Canadian schools. but there are schools even outside of those countries that will ask for or will accept SAT or ACT scores to help you out. As for what those schools are, that's something you'll have to find out. Like I can't speak for every single college in the world, but nearly every college in the U.S. Wants you to take either SAT or ACT. Let's see, are the SATs really necessary for universities, or do they accept them without SATs? Well, that's something that is changing to a degree because of the international lockdown right now. Most, well, not, I don't want to say most, but many colleges are making the SAT an optional part of the application now. We still recommend that for if you're applying to those schools that you take the SAT or the ACT, because they'll still look at your scores and use that as a factor in determining not just admissions but financial aid. But that's something you'll have to find out from the universities themselves. Most do require an SAT or an ACT, but some don't. So find out from where you're applying. It will be specifically mentioned on the applications that you give. Difference between SATs and the subject tests. Well, the subject tests are additional requirements that a small number of schools will ask for. And so, everybody asks for an SAT. Take your standard regular SAT, get your, 3, hopefully 4-digit number, get that score and have that on your application. But some schools will say, we also want you to take 2 or 3 SAT subject tests. We want you to take the math, 2, and 1 other of your choosing, be it, physics or chemistry or Chinese or American history, or whatever, right? And each of those tests is 1 hour long, entirely multiple choice, and has its own particular curve. And, you can and should prepare for those when they come. But it's unlikely that you're applying to a school that asks for it. If you are, take the SAT subject test. But you can't take them on the same day you take the regular SAT. So if you haven't taken the regular SAT, get that out of the way first, then worry about what you're doing with the subject tests. Okay. I think we're well over time. You're welcome. I hope this was helpful. If you have any other questions, feel free to drop me a line. And we do these webinars on a semi-weekly basis anyway, so you can drop in and ask future questions if you like. So as I said, I hope this was helpful, and I'll hopefully talk to you all sometime soon. All right. Take care, all.